So I think, although I'm not a parent, I'm sure a lot of listeners are, and they would love to hear some advice on how to make their kids indistractable.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most important section of the book if you have kids, because if you think the world is distracting now, I mean, just wait a few years. It's only going to become more distracting with virtual reality and augmented reality and who knows what other reality. Like the world is only going to become a more potentially distracting place. And so I think if you want to give your kid the skill of the century, teach them how to be indistractable, because there will be two kinds of people in the world: people who let their time and their attention be controlled and manipulated by others, and people who say, no, I decide for myself how I will control my attention, how I will control my life, by understanding how to become indistractable. So the way you raise indistractable kids starts with, and this is somewhat uncomfortable advice for parents, is first and foremost is that we have to become indistractable ourselves. That children are born with these hypocrisy detection devices, and they're constantly scanning to see where we screw up. And so we have to set an example. If you are checking Facebook, you can't tell your kid to stop playing Fortnite, right? Like you have to lead by example. So you can't be a hypocrite. And then what we can do is we can think of it kind of like with a pool, okay, with a swimming pool. Swimming pools are deadly. You know, far too many children drown every year because of swimming pools. Now, does that mean that we will never let children swim in swimming pools? No, we teach them how to swim. So at first, we make sure that we observe them. We make sure that they understand, how to dip your toes in the water, and then how to go in, and then how to wade, and how to doggy paddle, and we guide them. In the same way, when it comes to online technology, any form of media needs supervision to make sure it's age appropriate. As wonderful as reading is, I wouldn't let my kid go into a library and just read any book. She's not ready for every book out there. There's a lot of books that a 12-year-old little girl is not ready for. So, any form of media requires parental supervision to make sure it's age appropriate. So please do not make the iPad into an iNanny. Make sure you know what your kid is consuming. And today there are so many tools out there. Many of them are free to help us make sure that we can moderate what our kids are using and making sure it's age appropriate. So that's very important. And then what we can also do is to empower them to learn this skill of becoming indistractable. So with my daughter, some of her first words were iPad time, iPad time. And it got to a point where it was too much because it was crowding out other things in her life. So as opposed to bringing down the hammer and telling her, we're parents, we know best, we're going to take it away from you, we wanted to figure out how we can help her learn this skill, because this isn't something that, is suddenly going to go away. Distraction is going to be a struggle for her for the rest of her life. That's what it's just part of living in the modern world. So what we told her was, look, these technologies, they're not melting your brain. They're not evil. We didn't want to scare her into, not being comfortable with technology. We want her to be very comfortable with technology. Her future livelihood is probably going to depend on it. So, but what we wanted her to understand was that using these technologies too much comes at a cost of something else. It's an opportunity cost. It's time with your friends. It's time playing outside. It's time with mommy and daddy. That's the cost of too much time on a device. So we asked her, how much time would you like to spend with a device? Okay. And we put the power in her hands. And I could see she was like, oh, wow, what's going on here? And so she said 2 episodes. So 2 episodes on Netflix. She was talking about Netflix episodes of a kid show that I knew was age appropriate, that she loved. That's 45 minutes. I have no problem with 45 minutes. But what I told her was, look, that's fine. But how will you monitor that time? Because I can't be the person who tells you 45 minutes are up. How will you make sure that you spend the amount of time that you yourself said is the right amount of time for you? And so she came up with a brilliant idea. We used to have a microwave that was below the countertop, and she could walk up to it just at 5, 6 years old, and she could set the timer to beep after 45 minutes. Today, the iPad comes with this, by the way. You can program they have screen time features that will tell you this, or sometimes she'll use Amazon Alexa and say, set a timer for 45 minutes. And in that way, she has learned this skill to self-moderate. And that's an incredibly valuable skill because, remember, parents, we are not raising children. We are not raising children. We are raising future adults. And so we have to empower them with this skill set so that they can monitor themselves even when we're not around, right? When they go to a friend's house or they go off to college or they leave the house, they have to learn this skill for themselves. And this is a wonderful way to teach it to them.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point to make. It's like, technology is going to be with them for the rest of their lives. So instead of like saying, like banning all technology and like you can't use a smartphone until you're 16, it's like, no, give them a smartphone, teach them how to use it properly because they're going to be using it for the rest of your life. And that's why I loved, even though I'm not a parent, like I was reading that advice and I'm like, that's so wonderful. And I wrote a note like, come back when you have kids and I'll be back.
I will say though, however, we should consider, I said very deliberately, age appropriate. And I think many parents make the mistake of not considering what really is age appropriate. I see kids at 10 years old on Instagram or TikTok, and that is a big mistake because the companies themselves tell you the minimum age is 13. Why the heck would you let your kid use a product that the manufacturer is telling you the minimum age for? So at least listen to that. I personally think, look, middle school, high school is hard enough without social media. I'm not sure I would give even a 13-year-old access to social media. I don't know if it's age appropriate, but that's something you need to discuss with your teenager. But certainly, a pared down smartphone or a flip phone that doesn't have all the bells and whistles. I don't think a kid needs to have access to social media in their teen years. Frankly, it can wait a little bit longer. But giving them a phone without those features and making sure, that how do you know a kid is ready for a device when they know how to turn it off, right? Can they come to the dinner table and understand that that's a no phone zone? Okay, do they leave it behind? When they have homework to do, do they know how to use the do not disturb feature so that they can concentrate? That's how we make sure that kids know how to use these, are ready for these technologies.
Yeah, that's great advice.